Well, hello and welcome back to Ride Rescue. Oh man, somebody's gonna have to rescue me. Definitely gonna have to get some help. This car went from running really well to running poorly in the cold, being dragged back on a tow truck, to just flat out not even starting. So I know now that it's electrical, and I suspect the coil, it went from just firing intermittently to not firing at all. So got another coil on it now, but before I start the car up, I want to get the mufflers on it. It's just too loud, too risky to be backfiring, throwing flames. It's also risky of blowing up my brand new mufflers again, but I'm very confident now. I've got the carburetors dialed in, I've got them jetted down. I'll be able to control how much fuel is going through the system, be able to monitor and watch, make sure that I'm not flooding it out, which brings up the point. Now I need to get all of my linkage dialed in, get that linkage to where it's opening up wide open throttle where it was only opening maybe 3/4 before, and then get the timing right so that I'm not opening the outer carburetors too soon, and that it's actually opening the outer carburetors. They were only opening not even 50% the way that linkage was set up. So this episode I'll finish up all the linkage, I'll get the mufflers on, and we're gonna make this thing run. So I received my my new mechanical linkage kit. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove that temporary piece that I put in, and then I'll start playing around with how all of this goes together and getting what makes the most sense when it comes to getting everything to go fully closed and wide open throttle. I'm going to go ahead and take this other fuel line off and get that out of the way. So this kit that I purchased came with a new bracket back here. I'm looking at it, and it's exactly the same bracket that is on here now. So it's probably the same kit. This bracket appears to be exactly what I had in mind. So that goes, let's see. If I mount it like that, that's going to put that pivot point right where I need it to be. But it's not an exact line up to this other bracket, so I'm going to have to drill it to get it to fit exactly. So it goes that way. No. So yeah, I'm going to have to slot one of these holes so that it mounts onto that bracket. Along with this new bracket, it came with this curvy fuel pump wire or rod, and I'm trying this pin where this connects on in two different ways. If I move it to the outside, it hits the transmission linkage when this is all the way down, so it can't be on the outside out here, so it's got to be on the inside, and by having it on the inside, it does clear this rod as long as I play with the pivot point. Yeah, the way that moves, it's going to have to be out here on the outside. One of the things I noticed as I'm playing with this, this bracket that is on the back of this carburetor is really loose. I don't think there's anything really worn, it's just the way it was mounted. This shaft is sticking out just a little too far, so it's not allowing the screw to tighten that up. I think if I could get a good tight grab and sandwich that it would hold. So I'm going to file that off just a little bit. And the kit it just comes with a screw that tightens up against that shaft, and you drill it and tap it and then screw it on. I'm going to add a washer that's a little oversized, but that also has some gripping teeth on it.
and that should get out beyond that ridge and be able to really tighten it down. And before I put this on, I'm going to put some Loctite on it too. I'm going to use blue Loctite instead of red because the blue is much easier to get off, and I don't want to take the chance in damaging these brass shafts. Now that is much better. Very, very tight. No slippage. I can hear the butterflies closing tight on the ports. This new bend piece is not quite bent far enough. We want it to be tight from hole to hole. I got the distance right, but this angle isn't quite right. Still not quite right. A little bit more. Perfect. Now as soon as this starts to move, so does the pump. So it's perfectly adjusted. Put this clamp on there. Another clamp on this other end. And that one's done. I had to bend this shaft to go into the transmission over just a little bit because this new linkage, they wanted to collide right here. So I've got about an 1/8 of an inch gap between the two. So that's good. Well, I was trying to record all this on video, and after an hour, ended up being 2 hours of playing with this linkage and trying all different options. I finally got it to the point where this hole didn't work. This one did. I started out mounting it. I mean, there was no instructions with this. I don't know what they intended. But when I mounted it to the 2 holes that made sense and put this bracket out here, it wouldn't go all the way to wide open. So I ended up moving it all the way out here, which the way it measured out to be, it's just like the 2-barrel carburetor from the parts car. So this position clear out here made sense. I tried this in several different positions, but I couldn't get the travel far enough in this area. That should travel to be about 50% of the full throttle travel on the center carburetor. So in order to get it to that extent and get this one to bottom out, I had to move it all the way out here. And by moving it out here, it gives me more travel. This drops down and kind of cams over so that that one completely bottoms out. The center carburetor bottoms out. And it works out, like I say, about pretty close to 50% travel of that center butterfly to wide open throttle when it finally hits the secondary carburetors. And that's from what I'm reading online. That's about what you want. There's a hot rod shop in Florida. He claims it's best to try to get about 50% travel, 40 to 50%, and that's finally what I'm at now. So I feel really good about the travel, the way everything is working. It's not the prettiest. I wish there was a better way of doing this where it didn't have all these bolts. It just looks so backwoodsy, but it works, and it's solid. I've got locking nuts on these, so I don't have to worry about it coming loose. Same with these two. I'll climb onto the car and get these installed. We can finally start this car up. Man, oh man. I hope it runs. Hey, I got lucky. I'll need to get a jack out of there and lift it up. Clamp it down, and it's going to be easier than I thought. Okay, one last look. We've got the coil all mounted, tightened down. Got the carburetors all adjusted as much as I can get them without actually tuning it while it runs. I've got the linkage in, but I disconnected the outer carburetors. It's time to fire this thing up. I've got the timing advanced about where it was before when it was running really, really good. Probably have it advanced just a little too far. Excellent. It runs. I have to play with the timing a little. Timing's kind of finicky. Well, this beast just refuses to run on all 8 cylinders. I can get it to run so-so. As you see, it still wanted to miss. It's shaking and shimmying, backfiring both out of the exhaust and out of the carburetor. So as a last resort, I mean, I have done everything except replace the plugs. So I'm pretty sure the plugs are fouled out. That's the way it's acting. It's not hitting on all cylinders, so it's time to replace some fresh plugs. Got my fingers crossed. It's got to be it. Just a couple of them that I've pulled out. This one is just wet with fuel. It's just not firing. This one's dry, but pretty sooty. A lot of carbon buildup. Okay, I've got all the spark plugs replaced. They're all gapped properly. I think I've got the timing where it should be. Let's try it again. Okay, now that I know everything has been replaced, I've got new points, new coil, new spark plugs, new wires. Everything should be in working order. Carburetors are adjusted, double checked, jets, linkage, everything is spot on, and it's still running terribly. It's missing, it's chugging, backfiring. So going back through the original 1960 manual, a few things that I can check, and that will be the voltages that will be going to each one of the components, because I'm pretty sure it's now electrical. I keep finding more and more just with the symptoms that it has. And then along with checking each component, you can check the voltage that should be going to and coming from each one of those components. And one of the notes that I found in the manual is that this particular engine, the 389, acts funny when it comes to its brothers and sisters when it comes to the dwell. The dwell is set at 0.016 when you first initially set it all up. Its brothers and sisters, that's all it needs. They run fine with that gap. But for some reason, the 389 has a tendency to run rough at that setting. So they recommend backing off the dwell, turning it counterclockwise 1/2 of a turn. They don't talk about the gap. They just talk about that setting. So I was hoping to find something that said what that gap would be. And throughout the book, there's no indication at all of how to set the dwell, what gap to set it to. All it references is taking the distributor out of the car, putting it into a test meter,
it spins it, and you set everything based off of the meter settings. I don't have that. We don't have that luxury. I don't know if that is even available anymore. So I'm going to set it off of the voltage numbers going to and from each one of the components, open the dwell a little bit, and then go from there. Now flipping on the key, we're at 13.08. 13 is excellent. So that's one down. Now exiting the coil, heading to the point, you can see we've got a little more drop, but we're still at just above 13. So we know the coil's good. The actual output coming from the coil going to the distributor is a different voltage that we'll check. Another test will be to close the points. So I'll turn the distributor until the points close. So that should be in the 0.2 volt range. We're in the 1 to 12 range. So it's a little bit low, but fairly close. So the other test will be to crank the engine over and see what power is coming off of the negative side of the coil. That should be in the 5 to 7 range. So a couple of things that it says to look for when that voltage, when the points are closed, the voltage drop at the points, it should be in that 0.2 range, and I'm looking at a 0.1 range. So a couple of things they say to check is to make sure the wires to the condenser or to the coil are clear of all the moving parts where nothing can be grounding out, and that looks excellent. The wire leading from the coil to the points is clean. Another thing to watch is the ground. Make sure it's got a good solid ground to the distributor. Can't quite see the ground. I know I checked it while the distributor was out though. The ground was good. I can feel the wire. It feels solid. So I will test that ground now. So I've got excellent ground going to the points. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the points just a little bit more based off of that note that I had seen, where one of the good tests for the points on the dwell is just to start out with the gap at 0.016, and then while the engine is running, turn it in clockwise until the motor isn't running very well, and then to back it off a half a turn. Well, since it's not running at all, I'm going to go ahead and back it off a half a turn now at this point and see what happens. Okay, we'll get that cap back on. Now let's see how it acts if I try to start it up now with that dwell change. Get the timing back about where it liked it before. Trying to get the car to start. I'm twisting the distributor from about 6 degrees, which the original manufacturer says this should be at, but with the cam it ran best at about 32 to 34 degrees. So I've been going back and forth to extremes, and I cannot find a sweet spot to get the car to run. So there's definitely something going on in electronics, I'm going to have to just really scrutinize every aspect and see if we can figure out how to get this thing to start up. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull that number 1 plug out, reset to top dead center on a compression stroke, and then I'll go back to the basics of setting the number 1 plug wire in the cap and work my way around with the correct firing order. Okay, I hit the compression stroke. Now, if I'm correct, I pull the distributor cap off. That should be pointing to number 1. And it's pointing to number 1. So I'm confident now I have the distributor oriented correctly. Well, at this point, I am getting nowhere. I am getting intermittent spark. Nothing I do helps. So I'm going to throw in the towel. I'm calling it quits for this video until I can get help from Jim. So, thanks for watching. Appreciate you tuning in. Till next time, goodbye for now.